And I think that a lot of us need to look at how we can increase our revenue streams. If we're going to grow, we need to value each other's talents. And sometimes what that is paying people on the back end.
Yeah.
And that's okay. If people are willing to make that deal with you, then that's the deal you make.
Welcome back to Puppeteers. I'm your host, Adam Krutinger, and we have my guest host back again, Cameron Garrity.
Hello, good to be here.
All right, and we have a very special guest today, Jean Marie Keevens.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hello.
So Jean Marie is puppeteer extraordinaire. She worked with Puppet Heap. She works with the National Puppetry Conference at the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center, and is also runs her own production company, Little Shadow. So Jean Marie, welcome to Puppet Tears.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So how have you been? It's been a little while since we saw you last.
Yeah, I've been good. Really busy. Just wrapped up the O'Neill, so that's always.
Do you get any break from that after, like, for a month or two, or?
No, I take 2 days where I refuse to talk to anybody, and that's a nice time, just kind of recover. And no, I'm still answering requests and doing scholarship stuff, and yeah, sure.
It's like
that's an all year round thing. Yeah, it's all year.
Very cool.
That's great. So, what do you got? What's just going on? We'd like to start there first.
It's
Any
funny.
big projects that you can talk about?
Yeah, I was so afraid. I was thinking about it today. I'm like, oh God, call me in 3 weeks and I have things I can say. But what I can say today, I just became the producer of Puppet Playlist, which is a really exciting venture that happens here in New York. And just recently also became, there was a West Coast version produced by Liz Hara. And Puppet Playlist is a really fun cabaret where you do a unique piece that's built around a particular song. And then in between the puppetry, there's live music with really high-end musicians. And Jocelyn from Pearl and the Beard just became their musical producer a couple months back. So I think it's going to be really exciting.
Do they have a specific venue that they perform this in?
Mostly they perform at the Tank in New York City. But, there's possibilities for growth and additions there. So we'll see what the future brings. But the Tank has been a really loving and supporting partner since the beginning. So
are you going to be performing that yourself at all too?
I'd like to. I performed in the first two, little known fact, in the first two Puppet Playlists, because it was, a new thing and they were just kind of finding the puppet scene. Right. And I haven't been back since, but there's a couple things I might want to do. So we'll see. But I think the first time, the theme coming up is going to be Queen, which is awesome.
Yeah, because each show is based on a single performer, correct? Or
either a single performer or a theme. It might be country music or it might be Dolly Parton.
Got it.
Nice.
It could depend. But then the next one coming up is in October, and it's Queen, which coincidentally coincides with the release of the new Freddie Mercury movie. So yeah, that's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it, but I think I'm going to sit that one out. Let's find my footing first.
That should get a lot of attention with the movie going at the same time. That's like great timing or great coincidence or good planning on somebody.
It was really good serendipity there.
Any other projects that are coming up, or that's in 3 weeks we'll circle back?
Yeah, in 3 weeks I hope really exciting news. Not that Puppet Playlist is exciting news. Also, absolutely. I'm working on a show as a executive producer called The Riddle of the Trilobites, and that is a co-production with Collaboration Town, which is a New York-based production company, and we will be workshopping the show in Flint, Michigan. Full stage workshopping, by the way. When I say workshopping, we're going big here. Yeah. We'll be workshopping in Flint, Michigan in February, and that will open in New York City in 2020 at the New Victory Theater.
Fantastic.
So yeah, that's a nice long-term thing we've got going on. And also I'm working with Ronnie Burkett on Crave, which is his incredible piece that just came out of the O'Neill. I'm excited about that.
I'd love to talk about that, because there's two people who were not at the O'Neill this year. The pictures and everything just look beautiful. Can you talk about that project a little bit, just what it is and how it's sort of unique to other puppetry shows?
Yeah, it's well, I'll tell you how it's unique to Ronnie. First of all, Ronnie is known for talking like, I feel like I need a kitsch mug. Darn.
Cam's gonna buy you one. Cam's gonna buy you one.
I don't have any of my good swag around me right now. No, I saw Peter Lintz's interview and I was like, I've been out swagged. I have nothing with me right now.
That's right.
But Ronnie show. So Ronnie is known for doing very verbose one-man shows with a ton of puppets. And this was 2 puppets, 14 puppeteers, no Ronnie on stage and no language. So it was everything that he has done turned over. And he said he wanted all 14 puppeteers on the 2 puppets. So it was 2 marionette-style puppets being performed with people on the ground with them, which we all know is really untraditional. In America, other countries do it, but and live music composed by Melissa Dunphy that will like melt your brain.
Oh yeah.
I could tell you this. I said this to Ronnie. I always say I can't stand when people say it's everything, right? Is it everything? Is it music and art and dance? And is it really everything, or is it really great? This is everything. It's everything. And it's the first time I felt that in so long that I was like, and it's 18 minutes.
Wow.
And it shouldn't be 1 minute longer or 1 minute shorter. And it's just the life cycle of 2 beings, and we experience this moment with them. And my hope is that we can bring it to really important venues like the UN or MoMA or The Hague, places where if people just didn't talk and they just breathed together in their humanity, what could puppetry be? Right. And this is what that piece does. And what's particularly cool about it, and shout out to James Godwin who gave this idea, we took out all the chairs in the venue. And the only chairs that were there were some, a small smattering of raked seating for those who weren't able-bodied, which is essential to me. I won't produce a show in a place where there's nothing, there's no ability to people who are less able-bodied. So not why they did it, but just a random fact. So we had that, and people could then just move around the space, whether they were moving around on the floor or the catwalk above that. So it was really, it was an experience,
Yeah.
And it can be replicated. It will be different every time, but it is a piece that I believe can keep happening. So we're trying to figure that out. We've got to move at least 20 people to do it, and that's kind of expensive. So
sure.
From different countries.
Oh, right, because you had people even from Israel and some other, it seemed like a really international O'Neill this year. Yeah.
I mean, it is every year, but this year it definitely shouted itself out, which was exciting.
Yeah. So then your role in facilitating it as a producer will be really looking for venues and places to bring it.
And find a way to fund it, because I was so passionate about this piece. Can I tell you a short story?
Please.
So we were, Ronnie was running his rehearsals, and they were very sacred. Not that it was closed door, anybody could go in, but nobody wanted to, because you could see the bonding happening within the group. So if you snuck in, like people were sneaking in and like hiding behind poles and stuff because they didn't want to interrupt the vibe, which is awesome. And I just decided at one point, like, I really need to go over to the other side of the barn to get something. So I'm going to go in and slowly watch rehearsal while going to get what I need. And Ronnie said, "Oh, this is perfect timing. We're going to do our first run through with music. We'll do it for JMK." And I was like, okay, great. So I'll just be audience then and walk around the space and watch for, what needs to happen with the piece. And he said, great. And then they started doing it. And I just started ugly crying. It was horrible. I could not keep it together. I broke out in hives, head to toe. I couldn't stop touching my hair. My hair's growing. I'm just like having this full body reaction to this piece. And the performers had been doing empathy training all week. So part of what they were doing was if they weren't touching a string, they would go by someone in the audience and just gently touch them. But I was the only person in the audience. So they just kept touching me. So I just kept crying more.
Was that helping or hurting?
I don't know. It was just so full on. But from that moment, I was like, wow, this piece is important. For me to ugly cry right out of the gate is like, I cry at AT&T commercials, but not like ugly cry. This was full on. And afterwards, Ronnie said, "So how are we doing?"
Yeah. So like if it was to travel, then would it travel with other shows then, or would it be an opening to something else? Or how do you imagine pitching it to places?
I think it has to be a closer.
Yeah.
It can't open anything. And what I'm hoping is that it's a standalone. Like it could absolutely be at festivals and things like that.
Yeah.
But if there's some kind of, I'm throwing this out to the entire world, Jean Marie at littleshadowproductions.com if you have an idea. Yeah, you like that, Cam.
I do.
I could see it as part of like a symposium.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if there's an important conversation going on and you need some moment to stop and reflect, you know, there's a hate crime that happens in it, and you know, birth, and it's really just a full life cycle. That video, we will have a video, but the video will never do it justice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you have something like a Women of the World Summit, great place for this to happen.
I think that's a great idea, like you said, like MoMA and other art museums. I think that's a great place for that shorter form. That'd be great.
And there's something about it, you know, I've been really thinking about object and puppetry a lot. And I don't know if that's something that's always kind of been in the back of my mind, but I kind of wonder, where can puppets live as installation and then come to life? And it's not a new idea. It's just something that we're not doing all that much. And so I feel this piece at this time could do a lot of good in the world.
That's great.
So we'll see.
Yeah, and I talked to a couple of people who were at the O'Neill, saw the performance, and every person I talked to seemed to see something different in it.
Yes.
It to work really well as a metaphor.
Yes.
So to be able to take it from a women's conference to something with doctors and empathy and all these different places and have it work in different ways, I think that's what puppetry can do best, and that actors can't necessarily do.
Yes, and to that point, you know how we always say, you know, what puppets do best is action.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's no words in this piece, not that puppets shouldn't talk, I don't feel that way, but in this particular piece, people were coming over and saying, my grandfather just died, I just got married, you know, I'm about to have a baby. They were all talking about something completely different in their life and how it moved them. And I was like, wow, this is just so personal.
That's fantastic.
And I think it's okay to be personal, you know, and allow people that right now. You know, we're divided. We're so divided as a globe. And to be in a room together and having unique experiences together, that's a great thing for us to give ourselves permission to do.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I'm really excited about it. Can you tell?
No, it's fantastic. And I think it's something you and Pam and a lot of people at the O'Neill have taught us, is that in being specific in your storytelling and in having that true specificity, it becomes even more universal, and it becomes something that resonates with people more so than, you know, your standard, you know, 3-act play or whatever. So that's fantastic.
I agree. It's funny. Well, I said it right, but it's funny. When I said, you know, Ronnie said, how am I doing? You know, finished the ugly cry, but then I did say to him, so there's this one moment where they're holding each other, and if that right hand doesn't come up, it's not holding the other puppet. Like, is it possible to get that right hand up? And he burst out laughing. And then he said, can we go into this formation? And they all looked at him like, not right away. You know, it's going to take some time. But when they did, apparently they worked that hand, because there is something about when you believe every breath, my God, that's art.
Yeah, right.
And this was art. You know, and it's funny because I'm working with him and I'm working with the trilobites, which I'm super excited about for a whole nother reason. And then I'm working with Marty Robinson on his Halloween show. And that's the complete opposite. You know, it's the complete opposite. But there's still this gigantic use of space and this gigantic filling of your cavity when you're watching it. And to me, any show that can do that, like, I'm down.
Well, that's a great starting place of a bit of where you are now. If we could kind of go back to the beginning, when did puppetry first happen for you? What are some of your earliest memories of seeing and either enjoying or not enjoying the puppet arts?
No, I always loved the puppet arts. I always loved tiny things. I always loved textures. I loved doll houses, all that kind of stuff. All of my, in my family, we joke that you can't call it a doll, you know, because all my dolls had such personalities that they're like, you know, the D word with the yellow hair, you know, like
That's Karen.
That's
like,
right.
do you not know their names? And as I've said to you, like, do you know what kind of ice cream they like? You know, I knew that as a kid. Like, there was a whole story when anybody came out of a box,
Mhm.
you know, or was handed to me, however it was I came upon someone. So I think I've always had that attachment to character and object.
Oh, did you always have a little audience too? Do you have any siblings or something that you kind of did it with, or?
No, I had an older brother who I should take that back. He would absolutely resent me saying no. He was a co-conspirator.
Okay.
So to this day, if I hold something up, he'll tell you the whole story. You know, and my mother's always shocked that, you know, we both know all the pieces because we created these huge tales together. So yeah, I definitely did play in that way, but I never really thought about puppets. And I have to say, I don't remember owning one as a child.
Mhm.
I may have,
Sure,
but
in a toy box somewhere.
you know, like maybe.
Right.
I really don't, because I was pretty attached. I knew every single thing pretty much had a story. I don't remember a puppet.
Really? Yeah. So then when did you actually start getting into the puppetry itself?
So I have a really lame puppetry genesis story, which is I went to community college because I wanted to go to Brown. And I have no reason for that. None. I thought New England would be lovely. There's great art schools around that. I could say I went to an Ivy, but I did not come from a wealthy family, nor did I have straight A's. So how I thought that was going to happen, I don't know. But I went to this community college that at the time was #1 in the country. And so my teachers were from Brown and Harvard and all this stuff. And I could major in fine arts. And I did, and I loved it. And I needed a job. I had 2 jobs, and I needed one more to be able to like stick it out, right? And like
Just
be
straight
able,
by.
you know, like pay my tuition and have enough gas to get to school. And so I went to the chancellor and I said, I need a job and I think you should give me one in true Jean Marie fashion, right? I'm not going to a job center. You give me a job, sir. And so I told him that and he said, okay, I will give you a job. But first you have to go to the career counselor and figure out where you're going next. And I said, fine, but I'm not taking a test. So I went to the career counselor. I said, I'm not taking a test. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. And he said, why aren't you on Sesame Street? And I said, is there a degree for that? Because my family would be heartbroken, right? If I didn't finish, I come from a long line of educators.
Mhm.
And so he said, I don't know. That's for you to find out. I'm here to tell you about careers. And so I walked over to the library and pulled out the giant book, which is how you found colleges at the time, and went through and there was one school for puppetry. And I was like, great, perfect. And I contacted Bart Roccoburton and he said, we take 2 people a year.
Wow.
And I
And
was
that's over at the University of Connecticut for people who are
University-
listening.
Yes.
at University of Connecticut. I'm a proud UConn grad now because Bart came back to me and said, not only are you in the program, but I figured out how you can do it in 2 years. And I did. So I was a lucky girl is really
Yeah.
the answer. A lot of nice people opened doors and said yes. And I feel that way about my entire life, actually.
So going to UConn was your first like formal introduction of puppetry then. Is that
Mhm.
accurate? Interesting. Huh?
If you don't mind me asking, though, first, what do you think you said to the career counselor that made them think Sesame Street?
Oh,
Especially
no.
if you weren't, if in your early you weren't talking about puppetry necessarily. What made him think that?
Yeah, that's funny. No one's ever asked me that. He, in a formal way, I told him, yes, I would like to build a car. Yes, I would like to build a house, but no, I don't want to do math. I'm not an architect. Skip it. I like to teach and I like materials. And he said, would you perform? And I was there also part of the reason I was at that school because I had a scholarship to sing. And he said, you sing? And I said, yes. And then he said, you could do all of those things.
Mm.
Why don't you go on Sesame Street? You could do it all there. And so that made a lot of sense to me.
And that man was Frank Oz.
And that man, to this day, I do not know his name. I just know he had a tweed jacket with patches on the arms and a giant comb over. And my goal in life is to get a big award, not to thank my family or my friends, but to thank that nice man
In the tweed jacket.
in the tweed
With the hat.
jacket, whose
That's
name
right.
I wish I remembered.
That's right. Wow.
That's terrific.
Yeah, he
So-
changed my life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I'm sure, once you got to UConn, this whole new world
Mhm.
opened to you that probably, can you talk about that? Just
Well,
what it was
actually,
like? Oh, yeah.
Just one thing before that. So when kind of same kind of question. So when you went to UConn and you had no puppetry experience at that point, and they only accept 2 people, like what do you think? What do you think you said or did that made Bart want to take you in, show you the ways?
Okay, I was going to suggest to you guys that you should interview Bart on this show, but I'm no longer suggesting that.
Oh, no.
Because I do not want him to tell you about my audition. But I was crazy.
Yeah.
I basically let it all fly. And when I went up to meet him, I was really shy and afraid to talk. And I broke out in hives. And he said, I need you to sing. And I said, okay, but you have to leave the room. And he was like, what? And it's true. I mean, if I told you the whole story, it was crazy. I was so scared. And he was like, oh, puppetry does make a lot of sense for you, actually. And then he talked to me about my values and what did I really, before this person said puppetry to me, what did I want? And I knew I didn't want to be at a desk, which is ironic with what I'm doing right now. But, and I knew that I wanted to do something that could change the world. I wanted to move around the world. I thought maybe I'd be a photographic journalist, or I just wanted to do something that mattered. And he said, well, we don't do Muppets, but what we do, he said, you'll touch on that, but what we do is nonverbal communication through puppetry. And it sounds like that's something that would suit you, being that you don't want to talk to me right now.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty funny. Now I think it's funny, but then I wasn't sure. And he said, and we need an alto.
And we
And I said, I'm a soprano. And he said, then you should have sang that part. Because I sang an alto because I was scared.
Yeah.
And
So you had to sing for this to get accepted from Bart?
So this
an
was
audition?
first you have to have a conversation, which we clearly did. And I went with my portfolio, my visual arts portfolio. He went through that. And then he said, really what you should do is come here and audition. But I can see that that's not possible for you, literally. And it was just far enough. I was from Long Island and we didn't have any money. And he said, it's just far enough for me to say, I can see that it's financially hard for you to come up here twice. So I'm going to give you a video audition, which was great because I was a maniac. Yeah. I did the dumbest audition known to modern man. And he said, I'm glad because now we saw all of you.
Did you do the typical UConn audition of like have a box of essentially garbage and make something and come up with a performance in 5 minutes, like that kind of stuff? Or
yeah, first you had to just shoot a video, like you had to pitch yourself doing something, and okay. I did, and it was insane. And he, to this day, he's like, I mean, really, what were you thinking? I think I really want this, and then you had to do something with a box. And I do not remember what was in that box. I do not remember shooting it. It was like out of body experience because I was so scared. And at the time I didn't know how to edit. Yeah. So what I did before that moment was all just cuts with a VCR.
Oh, yeah.
Or you were editing like in tape.
In tape?
Yeah.
and yeah, I didn't have 2 VCRs. Let's not get crazy. And I was lucky I had the one. And I was lucky my dad worked for NBC and we had a really old camera. And I just figured I didn't know how to do that, whatever. And I shot it, and I shot it with like torch lamps in my mom's living room. My mom came in and everything was just turned over. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, just stay with me here, okay? Yeah. Anyway, UConn, it happened. It was amazing.
So wow, that's fantastic. So who was in your class, or who was there when you were?
Yeah, it was much smaller then. So
okay.
for people who don't know, the UConn program is known for like, there's a dividing line, right? There's the people who came before the Puppet Arts Complex, and there's the people who were in the basement of the men's dorm.
Oh, that's right.
And
I forgot about
I was
that.
in the basement. But I was part of the team that did all the interviews to fight for the Puppet Arts Complex to happen, which is a beautiful multi-million-dollar complex, and they should be very proud to have it, and they deserve it. They deserve more. But yeah, I was in the basement, so there wasn't a lot of us. There was 4 or 5 grad students and maybe 12 undergrads at the time. I forget exactly, but I was there. You asked who I was with. I was there. I will not remember everyone, but Kaylee Clemens was there with me at the time, and she and I worked together still quite regularly.
Right.
Nate Wilson was there at the time. He and I worked together for years. A lot of deep friendships formed there. Jason Hines, who's now at the Center for Puppetry Arts.
Mhm.
Yeah, I should say what people are doing, right? Kaylee's now a wrangler and a puppet builder. Who else was there? Hua Hua Zhang.
Oh, okay. I
Who's
didn't realize you were there at the same time.
Yeah, she was a very famous rod puppeteer. And when I met Hua Hua, she barely spoke English. And she was one of my very first teachers. And the big joke is that when we were doing this rod puppetry class, we had to move around like with a dragon. And we had to learn how to walk with our heel, ball, and toe, right? That's how you walk, so you can walk fast. And so we're doing this, and Hua Hua looked down and she saw the size of my feet. And she grew up with bound feet. And she was shocked. And she stood the whole class.
In
She
true
didn't have
Wawa
words.
fashion.
Yeah, she didn't have words to say what was happening, so she's just pointing at my feet. And I'm like, I thought I was doing it. And then afterwards she said, no, heel, ball, toe, very good. Your feet so big. Yeah. But she's brilliant. I learned so much from Papa.
And now you work with her at the O'Neill. That she seems to be come up every few years.
Yeah, from time to time. And she knows I desperately want her to do a class somewhere else so I can take it. Because I would love to work with her again. That was so like spiritually aligning.
Mhm.
And she and I, while we were there, we got to be in a show together. It was called Featherless Angels by Migdalia Cruz, who's now a very famous playwright. And it was directed by David S. Bjornson, who's also a very famous Broadway director. And we were doing these puppets that were doppelgangers for the actors that were on stage. And it was about gang violence throughout the world. And so as each of these characters died, their puppet being came to life. And it was so strong and so challenging. And Hua Hua and I were found many times somewhere just crying and hugging because there was such you don't need words.
Right.
And she and I think, bonded forever on who we are as women and who we are as female artists because of that show.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty powerful.
Absolutely. Well, and it's to be able to find a connection with a fellow performer, a fellow artist is just such a special thing. So to be able to find that early when you were in your undergrad is terrific.
Yeah, and I had that with so many people. Like I was so blessed. Our little group, we're not all very close anymore because of location.
Mm.
But we
Probably
were
just that.
Yeah, honestly, we were together at UConn for the puppet, the National Puppetry Festival, I guess it was, in 2015. And a whole bunch of people came back and we just couldn't stop touching each other. As puppeteers do, right? You're so used to being so close to each other that I should qualify that.
Get in my armpit.
Yeah.
It's
Make
not
sure you have
right.
the deodorant
Yeah.
and all those things. Yeah.
Well, who gives that advice, guys?
That's right.
Yeah, it was a really special time and it changed my life. And I went there first thinking Sesame Street. I very quickly went into Change the World Through Nonverbal Communication.
Mhm.
And I left there thinking I'm about to have a ride that no one else will ever understand but me and the 10 people who I was just with all this time. And that has proven so not true.
When you finished, did you have a goal right after that or a plan to get straight into a project?
Yeah, so at the time, it was such a small program that they had 100% job placement.
Oh, great.
Oh.
So
That's nice.
that helped convince the fam.
Sure.
So I went from there to Between the Lions, and I was a PA on that show. That was not long-lived. It was not the right moment for me to be in that atmosphere. I did want to be in TV and do all of that stuff, but I wasn't ready to say that.
Okay.
And so for a multitude of reasons, I moved on. And I think I don't even remember what I did right after that, to be honest with you. I think I at some point I was working with Stephen Witterman.
Does he work mostly in marionettes, or?
Yeah, Stephen Witterman is a genius at marionettes. He's also really skilled at monitor work with, Muppet style puppets. And at the time I had interned for him while I was in college. I had received one of those coveted Disney internships. And everybody wanted it, and I got it, and it was terrible. Those awful people down in that puppet lab that I was just speaking so highly of would follow me around going, "They want you because you can be Jasmine." So I was terrified, but I also had a sick parent, and I decided I don't have to be at Disney to be successful. I just need to keep going with puppetry, and I needed to make money. So I stayed home, and I could be with my parent and study with Stephen, who at the time was also working with Eric Jacobson, who's now Miss Piggy. So Eric and I have known each other since we were in college.
Wow.
By accident doing marionettes. What?
That'll do.
Right?
So on Between the Lines, was that how you met Pam and some of those people, or did you know them through UConn?
Well, like I said, I really was that shy. Like now I've learned to do this because I need to function. I'm still happy not to talk. So I met them there, but I didn't really know them there. I think the only connection that I really felt strongly that I left there with, I went there with Jared Jenkins, who is no longer really so much in the puppetry world. He's a line producer and does incredible work. But he was line producing, or he was doing something on that show. But Tim Lagasse was there at the time. And Tim and I had known each other. He loves it when I say this. He was a flashcard for me in college. The only way I could study was putting the things that Bart would say on flashcards. And I would, walk around campus flashcarding myself to try to remember everything. Because I had to have, I forget what it was, like a 3.7 or a 3.75. I had to have like some crazy average that like puppeteers don't care about in order to stay there, because I had scholarships. So I was a maniac about like, I have to remember every fact. And I had one card that was Tim Lagasse, Centrifuge for Puppetry. And Tim Lagasse thinks that's the funniest thing in the world. But Bart's point was, every kid here, when you get to New York, there is someone who's just like you, but he is spinning off work everywhere he goes. So if you want to know everything and find everything, find that centrifuge. And Tim was on that show. And he was making art, man. He was making art. And I was like, I don't know you, but I need to. And I'm afraid to talk to you. He had long blue hair at the time.
Really?
Yeah. And I said, we have to know each other. And he was like, yeah, okay, all right. We're having a party at this place. It's Marty's birthday. And I was like, who's Marty? Oh, God.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, it was, I have to tell you, when I look back, for me, it was like a wild rock and roll time, because I was so straight edge and so like on a mission. And I was surrounded by all these like, oh my God, I have an idea. And then they do it. And I'm like, what's happening?
Yeah, I love it. So do you think the work ethic that you sort of had to have at UConn to keep scholarships and things like that sort of helped you transition into the world of puppetry, where you have to be juggling all these different projects and multitasking and such?
Yeah, I think a lot of my life experience, just coming to UConn and going through UConn, informed my ability to just handle it.
That's great. So when did we obviously know you through the O'Neill, where you're the associate artistic director, for those who don't know. But when did you first find that place? And I imagine it was through Bart, possibly, or how did that work?
I did find the O'Neill.org. You're welcome. Through did that for you, Adam. Through Bart. Yeah. When I graduated, Bart was really great about saying, like, when you come here, I want you to have these things. You get this crazy list of all the things you had to have. And I was like, I can't afford the gas to get there. How am I going to buy all this and my books? And he was great about saying, just get these 5 things. We'll figure out the rest. And then when you were leaving, he also had a list. You need to contact these people. You need to do these things. And every single person, as a graduation gift, should ask for an Unima and a P of A membership, and they should apply to the O'Neill. That was at the time. I don't know what he does now, but that's what he did at the time. And that's exactly what I did. I was like, if he told me to do it, I'm doing it.
Absolutely.
And I
that's
did
again theo'neill.org, which is now right below you, which we'll put in. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, he suggested I apply, and I was terrified. And I don't even know if I did it the first year. I thought I did it right afterwards, but an intern at the O'Neill recently found my application.
No way.
I'm not kidding you. They came to me with a box, and they're like, do you know anything about this? I was like, this is my application. Because you had to handwrite stuff then, right? Like you had to print out photos and send. I had to send 3 photos of my work, an extensive, somewhat extensive application, and then references. And I don't think I applied that first year because I think I was afraid to list a reference. And then I ended up putting, not realizing that they were all O'Neillys, Bart and Tim Lagasse and Jim Napolitano, who were all O'Neill people. So really it was like, these are not the best references you could have put to anybody. But I got
Those
in.
are good guys to know, though.
Yeah, I got in, and that was another transformative experience. You know,
So that was your first time. What year was that?
Yeah, that's what I don't remember.
Yeah,
I feel like it was. I want to say it was 2000, but I think it was like 2002.
okay.
So, who was the first? Do you remember the guest artist that you were working with that first year?
The first guest artist I ever worked with was the Puppet Monger Powells, who are now friends of mine. They're Toronto-based artists.
Oh, that's right.
They're fantastic. Go to Toronto and see them. Gosh darn it. It's hard not to laugh at their shows. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And they were working on a piece called The Pirate Widow Cheng, which they did end up doing, but not at all how we did it at the O'Neill. And my goal was to speak, just period, and be in 2 people's participant projects, which are the individualized projects that get developed. And so with the Powells, they said, can anybody do a baby cry? And I said, yes, but not if I'm standing on stage. And they said, great, you'll be behind the scrim. And we had 3 people cry, and they gave it to me. And I literally felt like I had accomplished everything. And then the puppets were pretty great too. We did a lot of shadow puppets and tiny little dolls. They built this giant ship. And they had these lights in the ship, and the lights would come up in the rooms, and the puppets would go into the rooms. And then there were these huge scrolls that came down from the barn behind the ship. And so puppets would go up and down the scrolls. And then there was a huge Bill Hubner, who I ended up in a collective with afterwards. He was performing The Pirate Widow, which blew my mind because the guy was doing the voice of a woman. That hadn't occurred to me until then. Like, you could do that. Of course you could do that. Yeah, it was amazing.
That sounds terrific. So it seems like stage fright may have been a bit of a trend for a while.
Oh, it still is.
Well, sure,
You know me.
but you're certainly more comfortable talking with people and in front. When did that start to maybe melt away a little bit, where you were at a point where you were a little more comfortable on stage? Or is that not applicable?
Is that not well, I guess it's kind of jumping off that. I guess what some people might be thinking too is like when you were on that first started with Between the Lions, and you said you were working with some of these people who you are good friends with now, but you ended up not being there that long. Did you feel like, oh man, I blew it, or like, because so many people are so obsessed with the idea of first impressions, which is without a doubt important. But how was that ever something in your mind, thinking like, oh, I gotta start again, or hope they don't remember me, or?
Yes, and to this day, there's a few people who were with me on that show that like I am desperate to not be in rooms with. Like, I think about it and I break out in hives, like, oh my God, they're gonna remember me as the girl that didn't stay. But I know that I made the right decision in that moment. You know, I could have kept doing that job and I would have learned a lot, and it just was not the right fit in that moment. And I just didn't feel good at the end of the day. And I wasn't excited. You know, when you have an opportunity like that, you should be excited. And I was excited to go in and to do a couple things, but most of the time I was just scared.
Yeah.
And when you're that scared and you can't get out of your own way, you're not in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
And I also don't think I found the right mentor there. If I had found somebody who was like, I can help you along, maybe it would have been different. But I knew I would end up doing TV and that I would be with a lot of these people again. I never knew, like you said, like I never knew I'd be that close to them. But you know, I made relationships. It was enough of an introduction.
Yeah.
Sure.
You're there for a month. You're literally there all the time.
Yeah, and was that filmed in Mississippi?
Eventually, it was. Initially, it was filmed in
Okay.
Harlem.
Oh, okay. So you weren't having to go too far at that point.
No, but I was having to go through like gang fights to get to work. It was an adventure, let me tell you.
Yeah. So when and I'm sorry, I'm not familiar enough with your timeline, but what happened first, working at Puppet Heap or becoming artistic director over at the O'Neill, associate artistic director?
I don't know either. I've been doing, I don't know. I think, so I didn't become associate artistic director right away.
Okay.
So the O'Neill timeline is, I did the O'Neill, I did the first year with the Puppet Manga Pals, which was awesome. I met Deb Hertzberg at that, who became a longtime collaborator. And somehow I ended up in the Cat's Paw Collective, which has proven to be like a hugely influential group of people in puppetry. I came in late to that game, but they grew out of, and have since disbanded, they grew out of the O'Neill. So I became part of that, and then followed up the next year with, or maybe 2 years, I don't know, with Kathy Mullen's No String. It was the first No String project that Kathy Mullen of Muppet fame and Michael Frith, who's a famous Muppet designer, were designing. And I came into that, side note, I came into that first rehearsal and Michael said, I have a degree in millinery, as you do, and had been doing couture millinery somewhere in there, and do again from time to time. But I walked in and Michael said, oh, Jean Marie, great. So we need a hat. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go make your hat. Am I going to do anything with puppets? And he was like, yes, but we also need makeup done. And can you build this puppet? And I was like, oh. And building ended up being painting. But I mean, I could, but not, in a short period of time. And that ended up being incredible because every person we wrangled, we performed. I got to make hats. I got to build puppets because I already knew Kathy and Michael. I don't remember how, probably from Between the Lions, actually. They were able to shepherd me in that piece in a way where I could do everything. And it was phenomenal. And so Pam, who's now Pam Arciero, who's the artistic director of the Puppetry Conference, knew who I was. But I still didn't know Pam because I wasn't about to talk to her. And I did, with some other people, a really ballsy piece that year as my participant project. And then next year, I got a phone call from Pam that said Jared Jenkins, who was her coordinator, it was 5 days out from the conference, can't come. And he said that you could read his files and will understand his job. Can you come? Wow. And I was like, first, Pam Arciero is calling my phone. Or no, she called my mom's house.
Oh, wow.
I was like, what is happening? First of all, I'm still living with my mother. And second of all, Pam Arciero is calling my house. And she said, can you come? And I said, yes, but I have some concerns. I don't think she saw that coming. And she said, what? And I said, as an artist there, these things were a challenge for me. And she said, if you come, we'll work on them. And so very quickly, I went from coordinator to director of different things to the associate artistic director. But I wasn't hired as that. They made that position.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That didn't exist. But once we started sharing a brain, Pam was like, well, we should probably call it that, right?
Well, that's another wonderful relationship. And as someone who's been through the O'Neill a couple of times, just to watch the two of you work together is a thing of beauty. I mean, it's really...
Thank you.
Well, thank you. But so that's how the O'Neill happened. Then how did you end up at Puppet Heap?
So Puppet Heap. So like I said, I did like a little fashion moment, which I still kind of go in and out of. And while I was doing that, I was still doing puppetry on the side. I was doing, we had a lot of slams in New York at that time. It was like constant, and it wasn't curated like they are now. Like it was like, show up at this bar at this time and do something. And so I was still in the puppetry world, and I was working with Cat's Paw Collective, like I said, on like pieces that we would do for like Carnegie Hall or excuse me, like one-off things. And but I was working in fashion during the day, and I got a call from Rick Lyon, who I had met years before. It's all who you've met, right? Like never be rude to anybody.
Right.
And always say thank you, and then say it again a month later, because then they'll remember you, right? And so I was interning for Stephen Witterman in college, and Comedy Central was doing, Comedy Central is brand new. It was a brand new cable channel. It was a big deal. And they were doing a show with puppets, and Rick Lyon was doing the puppets, and he asked Stephen Witterman to help him, and Stephen brought me along. And Rick watched me work my butt off, doing a whole lot of things I didn't know, and asking a whole lot of questions, and then shutting up and sitting in a corner and doing what I had to do. And years later, Rick called me and said, we're building Avenue Q. I was working in fashion at the time. And he said, what are you doing? Do you want to come and build with us? And I said, how much? What are the hours? Like, I don't know. Like, I want to, but, you know, I still had an ill parent, and you have to, you know, there's life, right?
Right.
So
that show you were talking about, was that Crankakers?
I don't know. Yes, it was Crankakers. No, it wasn't Crankakers. No, it preceded Crankakers. It was a variety show where they were doing something with marionettes, and all I truly remember, to be honest with you, it's funny, you never think you're going to hit the point in life where you don't remember things. I don't remember. I met Carol D'Agostino doing that job, Sims D'Agostino. I worked with Rick intimately, and we were making things out of Sculpey and cooking them in his toaster oven in his home. And I learned to use a scroll saw. Nice. And apparently I'm good at a scroll saw. I really enjoy it. I actually wish I had one and could just make stuff on Tuesdays.
They're kind of scary. They are a little, if something gets hooked on it, just like, it's like moving around.
That didn't bother me.
And he kept
saying, that's not good. And I'm like, okay, well, just
that's right.
We'll adjust.
Give me a bandsaw any day over that.
Yeah, I get that now. But at the time, you know, I do. I love a scroll saw. So anyway, we did all this stuff. And then Rick called me years later and said, do you want to do this job? And I said, how much and when and who's on it? And he told me, and I was like, yes. And it was Tim Lagasse, Henry Iwaskio, the very famous and one of the most talented puppet builders out there, but absolutely one of the top 5 puppet building teachers. If you can learn from Henry Iwaskio, you are lucky. Jane Howe, Melissa Creighton, who now runs the Muppet Shop, Annie Fresh, who is an incredible puppet artist, but also an incredible inflatable artist. James Voital, Michael Schupak, who ran Puppet Kitchen for years. Like, it was like an all-star room that I got spat into somehow. And I went over to Tim and said, I don't remember how to cut foam. He was like, with a razor. And I was like, no, like, where do you angle it? Because I know how much that matters. And he said, oh, well, what do you think? Which I thought was great. You know, like, what's your intuition? Because then he'd know how far ahead I back I was. So we were all trading skills. I was an incredible sewer at that time, or seamstress, because I had come from couture. And so we all did all this stuff, and we were hitting the end of the job. And I said, I don't know what to do. And Melissa Creighton said, you know, I don't know if you know this guy, Paul Andrico, but he is the shop Puppet Heap. It's pretty new. I had met Paul at some random meeting at the Henson Mansion that I didn't belong at, but someone brought me anyway. So like I said, luckiest girl ever. Luckiest girl ever. I was in this meeting, and there's like a Sketsky in the corner. And I'm like, what is happening? Just sit there, be quiet, and ask one intelligent question so they remember you. And Paul was there. And so she said to me years later, you know, Paul's looking for help, and I know he needs administrative help, and I feel like you know how to do that. And she said, I've been doing it for him, but now he needs other stuff from me. And I said, all right, we'll see. She ended up leaving, and I ended up writing some really intense letter that got me the job there. And I was there to organize their files, answer the phone, and decipher. That's what I was there to do. And within 6 months, I was running the shop.
Well, and it seemed to
Or
really
co-running the shop.
right, as your position was as a vice president, correct?
I left there. So I went there as the administrative assistant.
Okay.
And I worked my way up. And I will give Paul Andreyko more credit than most people on the planet, because he will take a risk on somebody like it's nobody's business. And he knew I could do it, but I hadn't done a lot of the things, or maybe not in the puppetry world. So I worked my way up to the vice president of business development and client relations. But in there, I was a marketing director. At some point, I was like shop manager or something. I don't remember. I just remember once I started getting business cards, I remember my title because I kept them.
Is that what kind of got you into the producing world, kind of, and those kind of marketing skills? Like, where did you pick those up, or was this kind of second nature to you?
I think they're second nature to me. I really wanted to be at Puppet Heap to be puppet building, which I did do till like the very last day. I definitely assisted people. There was a couple of things I did myself. I did costuming, wig building, and all that, wig making, and all that stuff. So I have that ability, but I think I'm a connector by nature, and that is a really important skill. And also, I can't lie. I can. That's a lie. I can lie to your face, but I will tell you I lied, like I just did. I can't do it. Like, I can only get so far. So that's a really, I think, good thing, actually, when you're trying to make a deal, because people trust you.
Right.
And because I had a lot of experience in other businesses, like I started working in an office when I was 15. So I have a lot of experience of explaining things to people and making sure that the detail is in there that they're going to need when they go back, and making sure that they can picture what it is that I'm saying. So I think that ended up being really useful at Puppet Heap.
Well, and there's something so puppetry even about being someone who answers the phone and organizes file and dyes fur. Like that's so speaks to like being a puppeteer and having to juggle all of these different skill sets.
And that happened because I was on the interview and somebody came over to Paul really annoyed and said, "You got to pick a different Pantone. I'm never going to get this color." And I said, "You can get that color." I said, "What kind of fur is it?" And Paul just kind of like, what? I had just studied textile dyeing. Well, I lived in Rhode Island for a while, a whole nother chapter you really don't need. But I worked in a nursing home. I did all this stuff, right? Because that's me. And while I was there, I learned to dye fabric, but I was learning different dyes than were used in puppet shops. And so he told me what the fabric was. And I was like, well, why don't you try this? And then try it with this thing. And what about this? And they got the color. And Paul was like, guess you're dyeing some fur. So I would get in at like 8 o'clock in the morning because everyone else came in at 10. And so the fur needed to be ready when they arrived.
Right.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, who knew?
I've described what you've done, what you did at Puppet Heap to a couple different people.
Oh, good. What did I do?
No, but just in terms of the juggling of different projects. And I always make it sound like Puppet Wall Street in terms of like all these different things coming through. And can you talk just a little bit about, if you can, some of the projects that you worked on? Because I remember you told us one day at a lunch table about like working with the Daily Show, and just like the speed at which you needed to, the breakneck speeds that you had to get puppets in and out of that shop in ways that people probably wouldn't think about.
Yeah, I didn't know I told you that.
No, maybe you shouldn't have.
No, it's a funny story. It's fine. I heard somebody sent me a link, and Wyatt Cenac told a very similar version of the exact same story on some Seth Meyers or something. And I was like, that was weird. You're talking about my life. I don't even do that. Except to you guys. So that shop was very, when we started, or when I started there, it was different than when I left there. You know, we grew exponentially. Like I said, Paul is a risk taker beyond, but also a really skilled craftsman and designer. And so anytime you can get somebody like him to lead a team, if you can't monetize that, like, you can't monetize anything, because and that's okay. Maybe that's not your role in life, but what was happening there was just like, oh my God, he called people that hadn't done puppet building in 20 years and was like, I need you for this job. You need to do it. And they did it. And they came back to puppetry for the next 20 years. So your question was, so the Daily Show, so we did all different clients. Like I said, we started with very high art stuff. And then moved into very commercial stuff. We were doing Baby Einstein, I think, when I came on. Then we moved to some Broadway stuff. We were working with Warner Brothers on a mask thing that was really fun and interesting. And then quickly, I think it came out of the Warner Brothers thing. I may have made some suggestions on a contract that said, like, well, why don't we ask for this? And why shouldn't we have that? You think they're not asking? Yeah. They can always say no. So I think in that conversation, I started to move into someone who was negotiating and dealing more with clients. And so we started going broader and looking for bigger clients and the tiny clients that were super niche and would be gratifying for us. And so something like the Daily Show, you would get a call and say, we only have this many dollars. And we're like, we can't even pay people for that. Like, what? We only have this many dollars, but we need the puppets in 2.5 days. And I think they said 1 day. And I was like, no. But I mean, we probably could have done it, but we weren't going to for that kind of money. We're not working around the clock, sorry. Whatever it was. I don't remember completely, but I think we said 2.5 days, and we built these puppets, and we were literally sewing them in the car on the way to deliver them to the Daily Show. And then we were pulling the pins out of the center where you would put your hand so that the performers wouldn't get hurt. And then they gave them back to us, and we pinned everything, and we're still sewing. And we literally stopped sewing 5 minutes before they went on the air. And one of the puppets, I believe we had them send back to us because we wanted to make sure that it was stitched well in case they used it again. We didn't want our name on the credits and say, like, you know, this puppet fell apart on air.
Right.
But what we did do was we basically would say, and I don't recommend this, by the way, it's just, you have to know, and this is where you asked Adam, like, is it instinctual? I think this part is very instinctual to me. You have to know what your business needs when it needs it. And at that moment, we were doing really specific things, and this is what we were getting known for. It was starting to be like baby was getting put in the corner. Yeah. and that shop has, like other shops, but it was just really special at that time. And Paul's design sense is like no other. It needed more variety. And so when the Daily Show called, I said, okay, well, we'll do it, but we actually need this much money. And it wasn't a lot more, but this is how we want the credits to read and where we want to fall in your credits.
Oh.
So it wasn't like normally you get like tiny print, one line, you're part of something else. Well, you're not paying us.
Yeah. Oh,
and and you're going to own the puppet. So, you know, for the tiny bit of money that you give us, I want as much space around us as you would give Calvin Klein.
Yeah. You want the Puppet Heap logo next to the Armani logo.
You know, no, I want it by itself, and I want it above Armani. You know, like, no, or if Armani's going to be last, I want to be last. Like, you know, whatever it was. So there was, that's the only example I'd be comfortable talking about, but that was because that's known, you know, it's like a known fact that that's how shows that move that fast work.
Right.
But we were able to just kind of get a little bit more out of it. Right. And I think that I have now at this point in my career become somebody that when people are bidding on jobs, they hire me to consult on their bid because there's revenue streams that people are missing. Right. And we were able to tap into things in a really different way than the puppetry business was working at that time. And we were able to create the other thing that I was able to do because, again, we had an incredible team. It was a dream team. we were able to develop systems that come out of other areas. I used to work with an architect, and they have a very specific way that they sign off on papers. And I was like, why aren't we doing this on every design?
Mhm.
If we're working with Muppets and Muppets is saying yes, and now they want a change order, we can't prove that. How do we prove that? And also how do we start building institutional knowledge for ourselves and for our clients? That's a value to a client if you can give them that.
Absolutely.
It's like an added value. And so we did a lot of things like that that help grow the business and help grow the trust in the advertising world and the media world and the theater world. And we got really diverse and international. And it was an exciting 8 or 9 years. I don't know how long I was there, but somewhere between 8 and 10 years.
And
Yeah.
that all reminds me of Taylor Bunch talks about the concept of the 3 staircases of if you take on a job, you have to ascend at least one of the 3 staircases of something that you really want to do for yourself, something that boosts you in terms of a public image, and then the last one is from a financial standpoint. So it really sounds like you were helping Puppet Heap climb multiple staircases at once, even if you weren't taking 10 steps on all of them. If you're able to get 8 and 7 up or whatever.
And it was also identifying opportunity, right? Like when you're at the head of design, you're focused on that. And when you're the head of business, you're the head, everybody was really focused on their thing. And so whether or not it was a stated fact or not, but I think my function often was, well, yeah, we were going to turn this way, but could we turn it into this? Like, can we spend 5 more minutes on this conversation before we say no? Yeah. Or we're pitching this thing and they're coming back to us with that. And I know we said we weren't going to do it, but here's what I'm hearing in their offer that we hadn't considered.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that is the inherent thing is always, I heard Peter Lynch gave a great credit to Dave Goelz of like best idea on the table wins.
Yeah.
And I live my life that way. And at that time, Puppet Heap was a place where that was seen as a lot of value. And I'm sure it still is. I hope it still is there.
So with these kind of contracts, how much generally, I'm sure it's different case by case, how much back and forth is there? And like, there's also like that part of it where you don't want to ask for too much and you don't want to push them away and make them go somewhere else. It's like, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you hire me as a consultant and I help you figure it out.
And it'll go perfect every single time.
Yeah, actually, I was just a consultant on a bid that I said to the company, listen, I don't know that you're going to get this bid. There's just too many things that you don't know, that you weren't able to get out of them out of the box. There's multiple approaches we can take. Either way, the goal is to be on their radar as a responsible vendor.
Yeah.
Getting out of this. So if we don't get the job, we get on their radar as a responsible vendor.
Yeah.
So let's make those choices. And that's what we did. And we didn't get the job. And what they said when they came back was, these numbers were high because you made assumptions that were not correct. And in my conversation with them, I wanted to pull out those, but consult, I give information. But what they did was wise assumptions based on the conversations that they had. So you're taking a shot in the dark, but if you walk away as somebody that they say, oh, I get where you were coming from. Yeah. You're not unreasonable. They'll be back. And you make sure they're back. You check on them. When you see the show go up, when you see the piece, that was fantastic. Here's what I'd like to do for you next time. You never put down someone else's work and keep putting yourself on the radar. On the table.
Well, I know a lot of people that listen to us too are trying to pitch some of their own shows, probably from smaller venues where they wouldn't hire someone necessarily like you, or even selling puppets. Do you have any like basic recommendations maybe for the artist who's representing themselves? Maybe common mistakes that they tend to make. Hey.
Yeah, we'll talk offline, Hannah. And by the way, I have learned something very new, which is nobody can say that they can't afford somebody like me. Because the reality is, if we're going to grow, we need to value each other's talents. Sure, and sometimes what that is paying people on the back end. Yeah. And that's okay. If people are willing to make that deal with you, then that's the deal you make. And as a matter of fact, we made those deals at Puppet Heap.
Yeah.
You know, there were times where it was like, can't do it now, can do it later. It's where do you want to take your risk and who wants to bet on who, right? And that's about being a good person and a fine artist. You are, to me, when they told me that you were doing this stuff at Art Park, I was out of my mind excited.
Yeah, thank you so much for that too. Yeah, I know you connected with Roger Danforth on that, and
you're the perfect fit, and I'm so happy to see it happening. And I know you already had a relationship there, but it's how to build it and how to grow it. And if you weren't doing great work and weren't a responsible artist who was coming in with responsible bids, then I wouldn't have recommended you. But you are, you know, and to get to the next level, I think it's being in the room and making yourself known. And those cold calls are hard. They're awful. They're so awful. I think, as you pointed out before, Cam, like, how do you make that transition from not being able to talk? You do a lot of cold calls.
Yeah.
And you answer a lot of cold calls and you make a lot of things, me personally as an artist, that I'm not proud of, to learn what I am proud of, to learn what I do want to talk about, right? You have to make a ton of mistakes to be able to say, this is what I know to be true.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel that I'm at a point in my career where I'm saying, this is what I know to be true. I can write the show for your puppet. I can build the puppet. I can support the puppet in a million different ways. I can support your company. What do you need?
Yeah.
Let's have that conversation. And sometimes I'm in and sometimes I'm out. And sometimes they're in and sometimes they're out. And that's all fine.
Yeah.
This is not about our egos. We're making art. And sometimes we're not. We're just making some stuff. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
You know, I think that our art form deserves to have more confidence in itself. And if we don't demand that and we don't demand respect, then we won't get it. And I do think that, you know, you're definitely at a point in your career where you should demand it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Just do better next time. No, kidding.
Yeah, no.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, one thing I was thinking of too is like you working with all these companies and producing for all these people, because we know you produce work with James Godwin and Joshua Holden, all their amazing work that they're doing. How do you also balance it with the art that you want to produce, making sure that you have enough time for yourself?
Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's about my wallet.
Yeah.
You know, you got to pay the bills. I don't have a full-time normal gig at the moment. And I literally was just about to get one, and a couple things landed on my plate that I'm like, oh, we'll see which way that goes. Yeah, I vacillate. Right now, I just made a commitment to myself that I'm not going to push my art for the next 6 months. Because I have too many projects that are all going to literally come out one after the other. So I need to know that I have assembled teams. Another thing that I think I didn't say when you asked me a question before is, like, I know that I'm really good at assembling teams that I can count on. And demanding respect because you're giving respect is a fantastic place to be. So I need to get some teams in place to be able to breathe when those things all come to fruition in the winter and throughout next year. And then at that point, I'll start working on our projects again. But yeah, I have 2 projects that I'm super passionate about getting to the next level. And I have 2 projects that literally $1,000, they'd be done. And that breaks my heart, but it'll come. And I have faith that it'll come because the projects are good. And they come when they're supposed to, too. I'm very much like a hippie in that way.
So long as some jerk doesn't steal your show.
Don't steal my show. I don't like it. I won't steal yours if you don't steal mine.
It's just happenstance. It
But
happens
it's funny 'cause
accidentally.
I'm starting to make a transition in my career, which is exciting. And I've been starting to do interviews and panel programming and stuff like that. And I love it. You know, I love it. I love conversation like this. I wish it were going the other way. I want to be interviewing you guys. Can we do that one day?
Sure. We'd love that.
My God, that'd be so much fun. But I'm going to like fake a wall of puppets. I'll do it from Build-A-Bear, something like really like You did not. Yes, I did. We'll get them to sponsor it.
With all these kids paying their age.
That's right. Oh, shit.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yes. Look what we're doing here. It's not a good thing, but yeah, I'm starting to make a segue that I keep thinking, oh my God, is everyone else going to do this before I get there? But gotta try.
Yeah. So is this the first time you sort of put yourself on a personal artistic hiatus before, or is that something that you find yourself needing to do from time to time because you're just prioritizing other things?
Yeah, I definitely had to do it while I was at Puppet Heap. I don't think I did my own personal stuff for 3 years at one point, and then we knew that we were going to have a drop off. And I'm always writing in hotel rooms and stuff and drawing and making something if I just need my hands to be busy. But when that happened, when we had a little bit of a drop off, we did Adventures to Liverwurst Girl. And, you know, like whenever there's a drop off, I find something because I want to use my creativity whenever I can. But if I can't do it in my own work, then I always have one project that I know I'm not going to be on the periphery of the creative. I'm always involved in the creative, but I always have one project that I know I can make a meaningful contribution to.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, and I was wondering too then, so when you are able to put yourself back on working on your own personal things, if you find that is actually helpful because you have a clearer mind and you're able to put put all your efforts into your own personal work and you're not having to think about these things, these other things around.
Yeah, I've never had that experience yet. but I say yet because I'm calling it. Because I know that I have 2 projects that have to be produced by somebody else.
Yeah.
I know it. And I don't ever want to produce my own stuff. It's just always a necessity, right? For so many puppeteers and so many artists. We always act like it's just puppeteers, right? So many artists.
Right.
And just people who are doing projects, you know? Like how many people have done philanthropic projects that were by the skin of their teeth? And I don't think that we're any different that way. You know, you have to divide your attention. But I am now learning to speak in a way where I can speak to people who are not puppeteers to say, I'm going to need support and get them excited. And I am just hoping upon hope that they're there to catch me, you know, in 6 months when I am breathing again. We'll find out, right? I just keep saying yes to every coffee.
Of course. Well, yeah. And that's, I think, such an important thing that people often think, you know, oh, I don't have the time to do this. And they place priorities elsewhere. And to be able to see you and Adam and I have both been the beneficiary of that, of you just saying yes and just kind of accepting, you know, we're gonna do this and hopefully have a good experience from it. And if not, you know, you continue to compliment them 6 months later.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay to not find long-term synergy. Sure. Sometimes it's just a moment of exciting conversation that leads somebody somewhere. And who are we to take them down?
Right.
Yeah.
What does that serve? It doesn't serve anybody. Certainly not going to serve your career if that's all you're worried about. Like that's just not my vibe.
Yeah.
But you know, you just said something about saying yes. And to your question earlier, Adam, about advice for growing your business and moving to the next level, at your point in your career, and definitely where I am, I always say the first coffee's for free.
Okay, yeah.
But I say that in the email and I say that over the phone. Like the first time we get together, we're just jiving, right? But after that, now we're consulting. And you can't. It doesn't have to be a lot of money. It could be a barter. It could be anything.
For sure, yeah.
But you can't continue doing that because you're taking away your level of professionalism.
Yeah, for sure. You know, one thing I feel like that's something that a lot of artists have trouble with, at least initially, because the way they see it is they're producing something physical usually, you know, and they don't always value that kind of. I think obviously this is a generalization, but sometimes they don't always see that kind of value in just that advice, even, you know, in
the conversation.
Yeah. Learn that kind of thing.
Which I think, you know, again, I think we're all devaluing ourselves, right? Like the conversation is what propels the art.
Yeah.
The observation is what propels the art. It may not be articulated in words, but that's what made it art,
Right.
right? Was that, unless it's poetry, but you know what I'm saying, you know?
Sure.
There's a real essential truth, I think. And I think right now, for whatever it's worth, my opinion, what's happening in that country right now is like the need for a reboot.
Yeah.
Whether you agree with the political climate or you don't agree with the political climate, there's a reboot that's needed for respect.
Yeah.
And artists are typically the mirror to what's happening in the world, and ought to be. That's their role. And if that is the case, then they need to reset first. Like reset and get going. And that includes respecting ourselves. And I think I often fall down to well, you're a producer, or, you have everyone in your cell phone. Yes, I do. That's my cell phone. I did that. I worked hard for that, and if you want that, then I need to respect myself enough to know I will be happy to help you do that for 5% or 2% or whatever it is, there's a way. There is a way. And I do think we all need to just kind of reboot and go.
Yeah.
And go big.
It just reminds me of when I watch like Shark Tank and things like that, and it really does open your eyes, because you see these kind of things. People are like, don't give up that percentage of your company, or if we're talking about sharing percentages, but you can get so much more overall. That same, so you have 100% of a $500 project, or working with someone like you could open it up to a much bigger thing, even if it's a smaller percentage they're giving away. It opens up to so much more income potentially, because you don't have to do that part of the negotiation. You just focus on your art, focus on what you do.
That's exactly it. And I think that a lot of us need to look at how we can increase our revenue streams. Right, which is, that's like the business side of me. Yeah. But we can also talk about blue fur if you want. But I like to bunny fur. But there's something about the revenue streams, which Cam, you know that you're really good at it. I'm looking at 2 mugs that are looking back at me because you made sure. Yeah, you can go on the website, people.
Get your cup of tears.
There you go. Oh my God. Does he stop? No. Do you want him to? Sometimes.
Absolutely.
But those things, that's just smart. It's just smart to say, it's going to cost me $10 to buy these 2 mugs. But you know how much I'm going to make back on it? What it costs to buy the mics.
Right. Yeah.
There's those things that we are just thinking about, like make the puppet. Yeah. But if you could bring in an intern or somebody to go outside of that a little bit and help you expand, it becomes infinite, And I do think, personally, I sound like Marianne Williamson right now, but I think that we should allow ourselves to be infinite wells. I know I'm one. Right. Because I see your faces, and I know how you were when I met you, and I know who you are now, and I know that I had a tiny part in that journey, but you had a tiny part in my journey too, and every time we keep opening ourselves up, man, art's just going to get really good.
Yeah.
And hopefully fun.
Absolutely. Always.
Fun is good.
Well, thank you.
Oh, wait, really, no.
I wasn't going to close. I was not going to close. Okay. Don't worry.
I'm waiting for it, Adam. I'm really afraid of you. I'm not going to lie.
Oh, you're afraid of me?
Yeah. I earned it.
Oh, geez. I'm afraid of you, and I think I have reason to be afraid of you.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I've seen the rest.
It's a joke, everybody. It's a joke, everybody. Just for the record.
No, I was just going to, in wrapping up,
okay.
One of what we'd like to sort of close with all of these interviews is the name of the show is Puppeteers, influenced by the Jim Krupa yet to be written autobiography. Sure. And so we like to ask people what was maybe an experience of sort of a nightmare situation, be it on a set or in a theater or what have you, where things just didn't go, and but now with some 2020 retrospect, you're able to kind of laugh about it or what have you.
And Tearful Tuesday from the O'Neill doesn't count.
No, it does not.
Oh, I got some good ones, but those aren't my stories. Mervyn Miller. Do you know Mervyn Miller?
Yeah,
he
who worked on
on-
War Horse, and
Mhm.
he was at the O'Neill a few years ago.
Yes, and he has an incredible production company himself, based out of London, or Great Britain. He came to one of my classes one time. I was doing a lecture on producers, and he came in or producing, but it was specific to the people in the room. And I just said, ask me questions and I'll try to answer them. And if I don't know the answer, I will write down the question, I will find it for you, and I'll give it back. That was literally the class, right?
Mhm.
And because I know what I know.
And
And
I'm
he
sorry, this was at the O'Neill.
This was, excuse me, yeah, this was at the
Master
O'Neill,
classes?
and he
Okay.
came in, and then he politely excused himself. And afterwards, I was like, "I'm so sorry we bored you." And he said, "I came because producers have the best stories, and you didn't tell them." And I was like, "That's right, and that's why I still get hired."
Mm.
But I think my story that I would tell is when I was at, it's not really puppets, but it's like puppet adjacent.
That's
I
okay.
was working with Stephen Witterman, and this was years after college. Every summer for a few years, I still stage managed his shows, and which don't hire me as a stage manager. Not a good stage manager. You'd think I would be. I'm not. I start watching TV. I'm not good. But anyway, I was stage managing his show, and we packed the whole show up. And two of the puppeteers, who will remain unnamed, were in the van, and they were driving it somewhere to return it. And for some reason, I was going another direction. I had this image of them getting in an accident on this corner. And so I turned where I was going, and I drove down the street, and I watched them drive right into a car owned by an FBI agent. And we were like, and they got out and they looked at the guy, but then they looked at me. Like, why are you here? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. But now after that, anytime I think about something ahead of time, I can't. It just can't. It was too much. And actually I have one other thing, which is when I was at Puppet Heap, I started having nightmares about Miss Piggy. And so we started calling it PPSD. Piggy. Because and Paul said we were building her and we were trying to figure out some new technologies. And he said to me, I think you can't be part of the R&D right now. Mm-hmm. So that's
Just
not healthy.
Too many piggies around.
I haven't slept in literally like 4 nights.
No way.
I could not. I was so worried about the foam. I was having dreams of like features falling off her neck, and she was like turning into Alien on set, and it was bad. It was like the Walking Piggy instead of the Walking Dead. I was having these horrible nightmares. And half the shop started writing down what I was saying because they were like, "This is a great pitch." Like, it's not a great pitch. I can't sleep. And he said, "You need a break." Actually, that was my first vacation. I took a vacation because of Miss Piggy.
That's pretty good. And you could sell those stories to that new Jim Carrey show over at Showtime.
I don't know. I still like the Muppets. I might want to work with them again.
Sell the idea of the concept.
Yeah. I'm writing it down. I'm taking, there you go, right? Don't ignore it. I'm taking the idea.
Yeah.
So are there any things that coming up that you want to plug?
That's coming up immediately is in October. We're doing a puppet playlist at the Tank in New York. Like I said, that's going to be a Queen theme show. And there's an RFP that's about to go out in the next few days. So
is that something that people can apply to and perform as well?
So an RFP is a request for proposal.
Okay.
And something I would love if I were to be asking for something out of this podcast, I would love when people go on the Puppet Playlist Facebook page to write where they would like to hear more about Puppet Playlist. Like, where else can we be advertising those proposals? Because we'd like to expand that audience.
Yeah.
And expand the amount of artists that are invited to come. But there is a public request for proposal that goes out, but it doesn't, I think, reach everybody we need it to reach. So we're working on that. That's part of, why I was brought on. But
I bet you some people might be listening thinking like, they might not want my show though, or they might not want my
How do you know?
Like what?
You don't know if you don't try.
Just apply.
And can I run with that for a second? As Cam said, go with that. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
And just pitch your best idea.
Yeah.
Go big.
Mhm.
You know, and where you can, you know, if there's an opportunity ever in pitching to be able to say, and then I had this other idea that's like really normal.
Yeah.
Put that on the table. So if they're like, wow, you're crazy, they know that the normal thing is there, right? But the crazy is what makes you different. So yeah, Puppet Playlist in October in New York City. It's going to be 3 performances, great shows, but this is a time to bring in new artists. So, you know, I hope people will apply. You do not have to be an experienced puppeteer to put yourself out in the world. So that's happening. And then in Flint, Michigan, in February, we're doing The Riddle of the Trilobites, which is a really fun coming of age tale. That's an environmental piece told through the point of view of trilobites, because why wouldn't it be?
Sure. And I'm sure being in Flint, Michigan is has significance to the story
and huge. It's funny that it's so important. And I keep thinking, how do we leverage that? How do we leverage that? And the reality is it's right there. You're doing this in Flint, Michigan.
Yeah.
And these characters can only live in water.
It's beautiful.
And we can only live with water. So if people can't connect that, I can't help them, you know, like, but we're really excited about this piece. And the group that I'm working with, Collaboration Town, and the director, Lee Sunday Evans, and the puppets are being designed and built by Amanda Villarobos, who's in Brooklyn. And I've never gotten to work with her before. So I'm really excited about that. And then I have some other stuff happening that I can't wait.
Well, we'll share it when it starts to happen.
And not only that, if people want to follow you for that, where can they follow you where they can get those kind of updates?
Thank you so much. So my Instagram is at LilShadProd, bottom of screen, like Little Shadow Productions, but all brought smaller. We have a Little Shadow Facebook page and littleshadowproductions.com.
Great. Is that the best way for them to get in contact with you as well? If they want a producer or...
Yes, please.
Wonderful.
Perfect. Yeah, go through the website. It'd be great.
Is there just anything else you just want to maybe say to people, or any last words you want to say? Or
sure. I'm on a current mission to find work and to create work that puts women and minorities at the forefront of the conversation. Obviously, I think everybody should have a seat at the table, but I'm looking to find ways to make sure that in the world of puppetry, we're doing that. And if you're doing any kind of empathy project or projects on kindness or tolerance, that's what I'm most interested in focusing my time on right now. I believe that we all need to be making a difference in the world, and that can include just making people laugh, because we need to laugh. But yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So
we'll send them your way.
Thank you.
Great.
Well, Jean Marie Keevens, thank you so much for joining us on Puppeteers. It was so good to catch up with you, and thank you for sharing such wonderful work with us.
Yeah, it was really fun to see you guys. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Sure thing.
Keep inviting the ladies.
Sure.
Absolutely.